So here now, Victor Davis Hanson, Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institute and author of The Case for Trump. Victor, always good to see you tonight. I want to ask you about the press response, but I want to start with a question about the election. Do you think that if this information had been out there, these investigations had been confirmed before the election, do you think it would have made a difference?
I think it probably would have. There's polls that suggest maybe 8 or 9% would be persuaded. We have an election where 50,000 strategically located votes, that's not very much at all, would have changed the Electoral College count. I know that Attorney General Barr didn't want to put his finger in the scale, but Joe Biden and his team had put their fist on it. And by that I mean they were using the silence of the DOJ to misrepresent the actuality of their own culpability. And that not only did they recruit former intelligence officers to attest that this was some crazy Russian collusion, and that was a complete lie, but they repeatedly said the fact that they were not under investigation was proof of their innocence. And that was deliberately misleading, and that was empowered by the silence. I think Bill Barr did not want to be an Eric Holder wingman to the president or a Loretta Lynch meet on the tarmac with somebody. And I think they had smeared him very viciously and unfairly during the Mueller's investigation. But I think he should have told us to balance the reality. But just very quickly, it's part of a pattern that's very disturbing, Martha, because with this government political media nexus, we got a lot of misrepresentations. Suddenly, we were told before the election there would be no stimulus when lives and livelihoods were in danger. After the election, it's going to sail through. Suddenly, before the election on October 16th, Pfizer said, you know, we were going to make a big announcement. Here it is. We don't want to play politics about whether the vaccination is useful or safe. Suddenly, 2 weeks later, 6 days after the election, a little bit, oh, it's safe and we're going to use it. And by the way, we didn't have anything to do with Operation Warp Speed, which was untrue. And then when you get into Eric Swalwell, we knew, we being the government and the investigatory agencies, knew months before the election that he had been compromised, and yet suddenly we don't know this until after the election. And when you put Antifa and BLM that were rioting and looting and doing this all summer and creating this landscape of chaos, and then suddenly a week or so they magically dissipated, and they still are for the most part. And that creates a suspicion among the electorate. They say, why were all these things kept, and what's the pattern? And the pattern is the media has fused with the progressive agenda and the bureaucratic state. That sounds conspiratorial, but we didn't get all the facts necessary to make the proper judgment. We didn't have enough criteria, and yet this president may enter office the most ethically compromised and the most legally vulnerable of any president that we've seen in our lifetime. And it's very ironic because there was a hubris and arrogance about Joe Biden that Donald Trump was the one that was guilty of collusion when he had been the most investigated president in history. And he had never been, there wasn't even a hint that he'd done anything wrong with Russia. And the entire time, this truth was sitting right before all of our eyes, and we were deliberately and willfully blind. It's a disgrace in a way. It really is.
I mean, it really, I think it makes you look back at the questioning that was done and the lack of access to Joe Biden and the dearth of interviews that he did. It now makes it a little bit more clear why that might have been the case. And it wasn't all about COVID, apparently. Thank you, Victor. Good to have you here tonight. Victor Davis Hanson out of California.